Yo, what's up? This is your girl Dragon and it's time for another Fortnite Creator tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to create your own 1v1 or 2v2 game mode with a voting system. If you like tutorials like this and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe, that way you don't miss a thing. In addition to that, this tutorial does not include a build reset mechanic, but if you want to know how to implement that, be sure to check the links below. Alright, let's go ahead and jump in. Let's go! Alright, so here we are, you guys. And as you can see, this tutorial is going to be a little bit more extensive. So I do highly advise you check out the pregame tutorial that I posted before this. I'll post the link down below. If you haven't seen that, be sure to check it out. However, I am going to actually go through the pregame again for this tutorial so you can see the differences. Again, it's pretty extensive. I hope you guys are ready for it. Let's go ahead and dive in deep. Now, as you can see, there's some slight differences compared to the last tutorial. So I will go over this pregame again so you can see what those differences are. Let me first go through the structure of the game. Players spawn here and there's a time that lets them know when the game is going to start. Once the time is successful, the players are teleported to the game respawn area. When the players spawn here, they're going to have a chance to vote for a weapon. And after they vote for a weapon, they'll have a chance to choose a team. After they choose a team, there's going to be a timer that lets them know when the game is going to start. When this timer is successful, they're going to be teleported to their game area where they can play. Once there's 2 or less players left in this arena, they're going to be teleported back to the respawn area. Any player that's eliminated during that time will automatically be teleported here as well. Then they'll have a chance to restart the game or do whatever else they like. In addition to that, if there is a player that's away from the keyboard and they're AFK, and there's a player that has chosen a team, the AFK player will be teleported here and placed as a spectator. They can watch the game, or if they're still away from keyboard, they can still stay here without interrupting the gameplay. If they come back to the keyboard and they see that they're spectating, they can go back to the main respawn area. Alright, so that's the entire structure of the game, and I hope you guys are ready to dive into what we need to get all this started. So to get started, you're going to need a lot of devices. And to better help you out with this, what I'm going to do is go through each device, tell you what you need, and what the name of that device is. Feel free to pause during any time. That way you can stay in line with what's going on with the tutorial. I highly advise you name your devices the same names that I'm naming mine. That way you can stay on track. After the tutorial is complete, feel free to name your devices whatever you like. Alright, let's go. You're going to need 4 player spawner pads for this game mode. You can also make this a 1v1 just by doing 2 player spawner pads. I have named my pads player spawner PGM 1, 2, 3, and 4. And PGM stands for pregame. Next, you want to drop down a team setting and inventory device. You want to name this team settings and inventory device global, and feel free to place it in the pregame. Again, if you need to barrier up your pregame, be sure to do so with individual barrier boxes, like you see here. Keep in mind that hollow boxes around player spawner pads may cause your players to spawn in the air. Next, you want to have a timer. And I've named my timer device main. Another important device, you want to have a mutator zone. And this is just named mutator zone device. Lastly, for pregame, I have class selector global. And that should cover the devices that you need for your pregame. Now let's move on to the respawn area. or you can also call this your game lobby. Let's first start with the mutator zones. You're going to need 3 mutator zones, stacked one on top of the other. The first zone should be named Mutator Zone Device Game Start. The next one should be called Mutator Zone Device Game Spectator. And then the last one should be called Mutator Zone Device Restart Global. These mutator zones enable and disable at specific times to either assign the players a class or a team, or teleport them to a specific area. Next, you're going to need a teleporter, and name that teleporter Weapon Selection. Place that teleporter on top of a checkpoint pad, and you can simply call it Player Checkpoint Pad. Next, put in a channel device and name it Channel Round Lobby Checkpoint. And then drop another channel device and name it Channel Round Lobby Switch Enabler. And then let's put down a teleporter. And this is going to be called Teleporter Game Over _ Restart. Players come back here when the round is finished. Right beneath that, drop a checkpoint pad and call it Player Checkpoint Pad Game Over. Then drop a trigger and call it Trigger Waiting for Players. Beside that, drop a channel device and call it Channel Round Game Resetter. Next, drop 2 team settings and inventory devices. You want to name one Team 1 and the other Team 2. In the middle, drop a class selector device and call it Class Selector Global Resetter. For your restart, you're going to need one button, a billboard, and a beacon. Now, let's move over to the voting mechanic. You're going to need 3 item granters. The first item granter is named Item Granter Mythic. The second one is named Item Granter Legendary. The third is Item Granter Epic. If you want to, pause and drop your weapons in. If you plan on dropping other weapons other than Mythic, Legendaries, or Epic, make sure you name it accordingly. However, I highly advise that you follow the tutorial. That way you can change it once everything is working the way you like it to. Next, let's drop a tracker and name that tracker Mythic. And might as well drop 2 more. Name the second one Tracker Legendary, and the last one Tracker Epic. For display purposes, I am using an item placer, and you can see it here behind the barrier. This is optional. However, if you want to, you can do so as well. I'm going to move this here to the side real quick. That way you can see. Alright, there you go. And make sure you drop 3 of those. 1 for your Mythic, 1 for your Legendary, and 1 for your Epic. Next, drop a Score Manager and name it accordingly. I have Score Manager Mythic, Score Manager Legendary, and Score Manager Epic. Next, you're going to need switches. And of course, you're going to need 3 of those. Name one Switch Mythic, the other Switch Legendary, and the other Switch Epic. On top of that, you're going to need a billboard to let the players know exactly what they are. I have 3 billboards here, and 1 for Mythic, 1 for Legendary, and the last one for epic. So that players cannot grab the item placers, I have 3 barriers. I place those right on top, like so. Make sure it does not cover your switch. Right now that you know all the devices that you need for the vote mechanic, you're going to need a timer. And place that timer near your vote mechanic and call it timer device vote timer. Once that's done, you're going to need 2 class selectors, one for team 1 and one for team 2. This is optional if you like. You can place 2 player reference devices right above your class selector. Name one player reference team 1 and the other player reference team 2. Again, that's player reference TM1 and player reference TM2. Right above that, place a timer device and name it timer device choose team 3. In addition, go ahead and place a timer device for the round to start and name it timer device round start timer. Now that we're done with the game lobby area or respawn area, whichever you like to call it, let's move on to the spectator area. For the spectator area, you're going to need a teleporter and name that teleporter spectator. You're going to also need an item remover device just in case they are granted items. You want them to actually not have any items while they're waiting. So you can go ahead and set that down. And I don't have the weapons added to it yet, but you're going to want to add all the weapons to this. And name that item remover spectator. Also add a HUD message device and call it spectator. So HUD message device spectator. If you want, you can add a matchmaking portal. So in case they're spectating and they want to go into another lobby or play something else. For the go back button, we need a button, a beacon, a billboard, and I'm using a primitive here. Next, we're going to need a barrier device, and since we're using a teleporter, the barrier can be hollow. And then we're going to need a mutator zone and name it mutator zone device game spectator box. On top of that, place a class selector device and call it spectator. Alright, once that's done, let's move on to the main game area where the players are going to fight. You're going to need 2 teleporters. Name one teleporter, teleporter game TM1, and the other teleporter game TM2. Next, you're going to need a timer device and name that timer device count checker. Next, you're going to need a player counter and just place that under your timer device and just name it player counter. Now that you know all the devices you need and you've named all your devices to sync up with this tutorial, let's go ahead and jump into the settings. Let's go. Now let's start with game settings. For this tutorial, I have a max players of 2. However, if you're going to be doing 4, you want to make sure you put that to 4 players. I have voice chat set to all and team set to 5. Team size is set to 1, but we're going to have devices setting teams, so a team size of 1 is all right. The default class is 1. Spawn limit is infinite. We have 1 round. no time limit. Game win condition is set on most round wins. However, this game mode, players are able to restart and play again without having to worry about the game ending. So if you do want something like that, it'll be coming across in another tutorial. Join in progress is set to spawn on next round, the spawn location and spawn pads, and so forth. Now, I'll go through my settings. Again, everything is optional depending on how you want your game to flow. What's really important here is making sure that building cannot destroy the environment, and the environment damage is set to player build only. And let's go ahead and update eliminated players' items to keep. Again, allow hurdling and allow sprinting is optional if you do want that for the game. Be sure to turn these on, as well as mantling. For the tutorial, they're off, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Alright, next is the UI, and just take a peek at what I have. We're again not doing too much with the UI for this tutorial. However, I do highly advise once the game is up and running for you to do something really cool with it. You can add trackers, you could add all kinds of things to heighten the experience of your game. Alright, now that we're done with those game settings, let's jump right in. First, starting with the player spawn pads. Alright, for player spawner PGM1, the settings are there are no functions, and on events, we're going to send an event when the player respawn to the class selector global resetter to disable. And we're going to clear the player reference device. So place player reference device team 2 clear player, and we can do that also for player reference team 1. So let's go ahead and put that in there. There we go. Next, you want to have the class selector global to change player to team and class. For player spawner PGM 2, 3, and 4, the settings are the same with the exception that for player team is set to any. There are no functions. And for events, when the player is spawned, we're going to send an event to the class selector global to change player to team and class. Make sure that is for the remaining 3 player spawn paths. Next, let's set up the team inventory and settings device, global. I have it set for team all and so forth. I'll go ahead and scroll through the settings so you can take a look. There are no functions and we have no events. Alright, let's go on top. The mutator zone device is set to enabled on phase none and so forth. We have one function to enable when receiving from the timer device main on success, and one event on player entering zone to send an event to the teleporter weapon selection to teleport. Next is the class selector global. This will be switching to class 1 and team 3. For functions, we're going to change player to team and class when receiving from player spawner PGM1 on player spawned, as well as PGM2, PGM3, and PGM4. If you already linked those up, you'll see that they should automatically be binded here when you check this device. Next, mutator zone device restart global on player entering zone. And there are no events. Again, it's really important that you name the devices as instructed in the first part of this tutorial. If you do need to go back, I highly advise that you do so that you can sync everything accordingly. Next, let's look at the timer. This is timer device main. And for this tutorial, I have it set to 10 seconds. Audio effects are optional. You don't have to have it on if you don't like to. And let's see, there are no functions. And the event on success, we're going to send an event to the mutator zone to enable. That's it. Now that you have everything set up for your pregame, let's go ahead and move on to the game lobby. Alright, let's go ahead and first start with the very top mutator zone. Mutator zone device, restart global. We're going to enable on phase none. And make sure it's set to a selected class of 1. And so forth. Next, functions we're going to disable when receiving from teleporter, weapon selection on teleported, as well as teleporter game over _ restart on teleported. The device will enable when receiving from button restart on interact. As for events, on player entering zone, we're going to send an event to class selector global resetter to change player to team and class. You should have a mutator zone right underneath this, named mutator zone device game spectator. And this is enabled on phase none. And selected class of 1. And so forth. For functions, we're going to disable when receiving from teleporter weapon selection on teleported and teleporter game over _ restart on teleported. Enable when receiving from timer device round start timer on success. For events, we're going to have event sent on when player entering the zone to mutator zone device game start to disable and teleporter spectator to teleport. Next is the mutator zone device game start, and that should be right underneath your spectator mutator zone. It is enabled on phase none and has a selected class of 2. Everything else should be really similar to the other 2 mutator zones. For functions, we're going to disable when receiving from teleporter weapon selection on teleported, teleporter game team 1 on teleported, teleporter game over _ restart on teleported, mutator zone device game spectator on player entering zone. We're going to enable when receiving from timer device round start on success. For events, we're going to have it set for on player entering zone, send an event to teleporter game team 2 teleport and teleporter game team 1 teleport. Underneath that is the class selector global resetter, so let's take a look. The class to switch to is 1, and the team to switch to is 3. Now Team 3 will represent the global team going forward in the game. Make sure your size of volume is the size of your entire game lobby area. For functions, we're going to enable when receiving from, channel round game resetter on received transmit. We're going to disable when receiving from, player spawner PGM1 on player spawn, class selector team 1 on team switched, class selector team 2 on team switched. We're going to change player to team and class when receiving from mutator zone device, restart global on player entering zone, and channel round game resetter on receive transmit, and there are no events. Now let's take a look at the teleporter, and let's start with teleporter weapon selection. For functions, we're going to teleport when receiving from mutator zone device on player entering zone. For events, we're going to set it so that on teleported, we're going to send an event to tracker epic to reset progress, tracker epic to assign, timer device vote timer to start, class selector team 1 to enable, class selector team 2 to enable, tracker mythic to reset progress, tracker mythic to assign, channel round lobby checkpoint to transmit, tracker legendary to reset progress, tracker legendary to assign, channel round lobby switch enabler to transmit, mutator zone device game start to disable, mutator zone device game spectator box to disable. Player checkpoint pad is set to enabled on phase always, and so forth. For functions, we're going to register when receiving from the channel round lobby checkpoint on receive transmit. And there are no events. Now let's look at channel round lobby checkpoint. For functions, we're going to transmit when receiving from teleporter weapon selection on teleported and teleporter game over underscore restart on teleported. For events, on received transmit, we're going to send an event to player checkpoint pad to register. Next, let's move on to channel round lobby switch enabler. For functions, we're going to transmit when receiving from teleporter weapon selection on teleported and teleporter game over underscore restart on teleported. For events, on receive transmit, we're going to send an event to switch legendary to enable, switch legendary to clear all persistence data for current players, switch mythic to enable, switch mythic to clear all persistence data for current players, switch epic to enable, switch epic to clear all persistence data for current players. Next, let's move on to the teleporter game over _ restart. You want to make sure this is set to a class of 2. For functions, we're going to teleport when receiving from player counter when the count succeeds. For events, when teleported, we're going to send an event to enable the beacon, to reset progress for the tracker, and that's tracker epic, to assign tracker epic, to enable beacon 2, and since we did not name those, just so you know, this beacon is located in the game lobby above the restart button, and this beacon should be located in your spectator area right above your go back button. Tracker mythic, reset progress. Tracker mythic, assign. Channel round lobby checkpoint, transmit. Tracker legendary, reset progress. Tracker legendary, assign. Channel round lobby switch enabler, transmit. Mutators on device game start, disable. Trigger waiting for players, trigger. Trigger waiting for players, enable. Mutators on device game spectator, disable. And mutators on device restart global, disable. Alright, player checkpoint pad, game over. This is set to always. For functions, we're going to register when receiving from teleporter game team 1 unteleported and teleporter game team 2 unteleported. Next, let's look at trigger waiting for players. And this is transmit every 2 triggers. For functions, we have enable when receiving from teleporter game over _ restart unteleported, and trigger when receiving from teleporter game over _ restart unteleported. There are no events because I initially placed this trigger to restart the timer. However, since the mechanic is slightly different and the players can select to restart the game, it's not necessary for it to restart the game timer. What you can do, and if you like to experiment, is with this trigger you can add a HUD message device to play a message for the players when they come through, or any other type of effect you would like to have. I'd like to see what you do. Next, let's look at the channel round game resetter. Transmit when receiving from button restart on interact. For events, on receive transmit, send an event to, switch legendary enable, switch legendary turn off, switch mythic enable, switch mythic turn off, score manager epic reset, timer device vote timer start, score manager mythic reset, class selector team 1 enable, class selector team 2 enable, timer device choose team 3 reset, score manager legendary reset, timer device round start timer reset, switch epic enable, switch epic turn off, player reference team 1 clear player, class selector global resetter enable, class selector global resetter change player to team and class, player reference team 2 clear player. Continuing on, let's move on to Teleporter Spectator Game Restart. Make sure this is a selected class of 4. For functions, we're going to teleport when receiving from button go back on interact, and mutator zone device game spectator box on player entering zone. And there are no events. Let's move on to the restart button. For button restart, it's going to be an interact time of 0.0, making it instantaneous. And so forth. This was initially a revote button. I'm going to change it to restart. That way it says restart when the player looks at it. It has an interaction radius of 1.0. There are no functions, and we have quite a few events going on. Those events are beacon, disable, beacon 2, which is in the spectator area, disable, class selector, team 1, enable, class selector, team 2, enable, mutator zone device, restart global, enable, mutator zone device, game spectator box, enable. For the beacon, I have a set to particle and a beacon particle style of arrow, and so forth. For functions, we're going to enable when receiving from teleporter game over _ restart on teleported, and disable when receiving from button restart on interact. And of course, you need your billboard to say restart. Next, we're going to go into the vote mechanic. Starting with the item granter mythic. It is enabled on game start, and all players will receive these items. For functions, we're looking at grant item when receiving from tracker mythic when complete. For events, when the item is granted, we're going to send an event to disable the switch legendary, as well as disable switch epic, and timer device vote timer complete. Next, let's move on to tracker mythic. Stat to track will be events, and this will reset between the rounds. We have a target value of 1, and so forth. For functions, we're going to reset progress when receiving from teleporter weapon selection on teleported, and teleporter game over _ restart on teleported. We're going to increment the progress when receiving from switch mythic when turned on. In addition, we're going to assign when receiving from teleporter weapon selection on teleported, and teleporter game over _ restart on teleported. For events, when complete, we're going to send an event to switch mythic to save state for all, and item granter mythic to grant the item. Just a side note so you can understand what's going on here, when the player presses the switch button, it's going to increment the tracker by 1 and complete the tracker to grant the items. In addition to that, it's also going to disable the other switches so the players can no longer vote. Now let's go ahead and move on to the switch. And this is switch mythic. Just so you know, there's a variety of device models here. So be sure to check and pick which one that works best for you. For functions, we're going to enable when receiving from, channel round lobby switch enabler on receive transmit, then channel round game resetter on receive transmit. We're going to also disable when receiving from timer device, choose team 3 on success, item granter legendary on item granted, item granter epic on item granted. We're going to turn off when receiving from score manager mythic on score output. Channel round game resetter on receive transmit. We're going to clear all persistence data for current players when receiving from channel round lobby switch enabler on receive transmit. We're going to save state for all when receiving from tracker mythic when complete. And then events, on turn on, we're going to send an event to score manager mythic, activate, and tracker mythic to increment the progress. Next is the score manager. So let's take a look. For functions, we're going to activate when receiving from switch mythic on turned on, reset when receiving from channel round game resetter on receive transmit. For events, on score output, we're going to send an event to switch mythic to turn it off. That means when a score is outputted on this device, it's going to turn off the switch. Behind this board, you should have your item placer as well as the barrier and your billboard name. Now let's move on to the other two, and you're going to notice that they're very similar, with the exception that when one's voted on, it's going to disable the other. For example, if legendary is voted on, then switch mythic will disable, and switch epic will disable. And if epic is voted on, then switch legendary and switch mythic will disable. This will prevent players from voting on multiple items at once. If you understand the flow of things, feel free to pause, set up the other two, and then skip to the next part. Alright, let's do the other two. Item granter legendary. Functions, we're going to grant item when receiving from tracker legendary when complete. And for events, on item granted, We're going to send an event to switch mythic to disable, timer device vote timer to complete, and switch epic to disable. For tracker, legendary, stat to track its events, and so forth. For functions, we're going to reset progress when receiving from teleporter, weapon selection on teleported, and teleporter game over _ restart on teleported. We're also going to increment progress when receiving from switch legendary on turned on. Assign when receiving from teleporter weapon selection on teleported, and teleporter game over _ restart on teleported. When complete, we're going to send an event to switch legendary to save state for all, and item granter legendary to grant item. Right, now for the switch. And this is switch legendary. For functions, we're going to enable when receiving from channel round lobby, switch enabler on receive transmit, channel round game resetter on receive transmit. We're going to disable when receiving from item granter mythic on item granted, timer device round start timer on success, item granter epic on item granted. We're going to turn off when receiving from score manager legendary on score output, and then channel round game resetter on receive transmit. We're going to clear all persistence data for current players on channel round lobby switch enabler on receive transmit. We're going to save state for all when receiving from tracker legendary when complete. For events, on turn on, we're going to send an event to score manager legendary activate and tracker legendary increment progress. And that's it. Right now for the score manager, and I might have to move the item placer out the way to take a look at it. Alright, so now for score manager legendary, for functions, we're going to activate when receiving from, switch legendary on turn on, reset when receiving from channel round game resetter on receive transmit. For events, on score output, we're going to send an event to switch legendary to turn off. Alright, let me go ahead and move these back. Alright, last we have the epic vote system. So we have item granter epic, and these are the options. For functions, we're going to grant item when receiving from tracker epic when complete. For events, on item granted, we're going to send an event to switch legendary to disable, switch mythic to disable, and timer device vote timer to complete. Next, let's move on to the tracker, and that's tracker epic. Again, the stat to track its events just like the others. For functions, we're going to reset progress when receiving from teleporter weapon selection on teleported and teleporter game over _ restart on teleported. We're going to increment progress when receiving from switch epic on turned on. Assign when receiving from teleporter weapon selection on teleported. Teleporter game over _ restart on teleported. For events, when complete, we're going to send an event to item granter epic to grant the item. Switch epic to save state for all. For switch epic, these are the settings. For functions, we're going to enable when receiving from channel round lobby switch enabler on receive transmit and channel round game resetter on receive transmit. We're going to disable when receiving from item granter mythic on item granted and timer device round. We're going to disable when receiving from item granter mythic on item granted and timer device round start timer on success. Item granter legendary and also item granter legendary on item granted. We're going to turn off when receiving from score manager epic on score output and then channel round game resetter on receive transmit. Then we're going to clear all persistence data for current players when receiving from channel round lobby switch enabler on receive transmit. We're going to also save state for all when received from tracker epic when complete. For events, on turn on, we're going to send an event to score manager epic to activate and tracker epic to increment the progress. That's going to do it for part 1, but don't forget to tune in to part 2. The links will be posted below. In addition to that, don't forget to check out all my games. You'll see a direct link in the description box below. But you can also check them out on Discovery when you come across my game. Just click on Creator Profile. If you check them out, you are awesome. Alright you guys, that's going to do it for part 1 of this tutorial, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Okay? Bye!